China touts itself as a climate calamity savior. It's actually the opposite. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Have you downloaded the China Uncensored app yet? If not, what are you waiting for? The links are below. And while you're down there, leave a honeypot emoji in the comments. So, just one day after Trump's inauguration in January, just one day, he signed an executive order pulling the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accords. It was probably one of the less surprising moves by Trump, given that the president is A, known for not being super keen on multilateral agreements, B, has countless times called climate change a hoax, and C, pulled the U.S. out of these accords during his first term as well. This has left a number of people wondering who will take over as leader of the world's climate action now that the U.S. has stepped down, just as it did the first time. But fortunately, while the U.S. has been flip-flopping on climate agreements across the Pacific, a benevolent power has been rising to take up the mantle of climate savior, at least according to Chinese media. Since long before Trump's re-election, even way back in 2021, official Chinese voices have pointed to China as a leader in the global war against climate change. And the Chinese press often emphasizes Chinese leader Xi Jinping's rhetoric on the green front, such as when he said this month that China has built the world's largest, fastest growing renewable energy system. Or last month, when he said that to protect the environment is to protect productivity. A slogan that Xi himself embodies, of course, as demonstrated recently when the Chinese media happened upon the Chinese leader out and about planting trees to safeguard the environment and the climate. But now that Trump has returned to the White House, it's not just Chinese voices preparing the climate stage for Chinese captaincy. Top people at the UN are saying that China must now lead the global warming fight. And op-eds and editorials with a similar focus are popping up in media like Bloomberg and the Financial Times. Certainly, looking at some of China's green energy numbers, it can be tempting to conclude that the country is bound to be the climate hero of our era. Today, Chinese companies sit on around 60% of global wind turbine manufacturing capacity, over 70% of global electric vehicle battery production, and more than 80% of the world's solar manufacturing. At the same time, in recent years, China has been building almost twice as much solar and wind power as the rest of the world combined. And in 2024, more than 60% of electric cars were sold in China. There's just one problem. Despite this surge in green energy production, China's greenhouse gas emission situation is less than ideal. As early as 2019, the country's emissions exceeded all developed nations combined. And last year, it was behind more than 30% of total greenhouse gas emissions, nearly 3 times as much as the US in second place with 11%. Today, China releases so many greenhouse gases that it has contributed more emissions in total than the entire EU, even though the Europeans have been burning fossil fuels like coal and oil on an industrial scale since the 19th century. And it's not hard to see why. The Chinese aluminum sector alone produces roughly as much carbon dioxide as the entire country of Indonesia, while China's chemical, steel, metal, and minerals industries together exceed the total emissions of the entire United States. But more than anything, it's China's coal industry that's cementing its lead as the globe's top greenhouse gas emitter. Since 2011, China has been consuming more coal than the entire rest of the world. To this day, the country continues to have abundant coal reserves, and it's tapping into them like there's no tomorrow, with its output reaching a record high of 4.76 billion tons last year, while the construction of new coal power plants reached a 10-year high last year as well. This might seem strange given all these solar cells and wind turbines China is producing, and also since China has reported that it reached Xi Jinping's renewable power capacity target 6 years ahead of schedule last year, around the same time that electricity demand growth actually slowed down. But the thing is that even though the country might have boosted its green power capacity, it doesn't use all of this capacity. Solar power generation, for example, actually fell below what was expected last year, despite favorable weather conditions for solar energy sources. That's partly because renewables are not being integrated fully into the power supply, which is instead heavily dominated by coal. There's a reason for this. For one, the Chinese energy market is inundated by long-term coal power contracts that lock electricity buyers into purchases of massive coal volumes that they can't get out of unless they want to pay penalties. Similar agreements also guarantee coal plants certain operating hours that limit the electricity grid space for renewables. On top of that, coal mining companies are deeply involved in the Chinese market for power generation, and I think you can guess which type of power source they prefer to see producing China's electricity. As a result, China is currently way off track to reach any of its own climate targets for 2025, and it will need to pursue deep cuts to its CO2 emissions if it's serious about its climate commitments, something that seems increasingly unlikely to happen. In the longer term, it's been 4 years now since Xi pledged to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2060. But overall, according to foreign policy, there is little evidence to suggest that the country's energy systems and policies are moving in the right direction. And it's not just that Chinese policies are making it difficult for China to reach its own climate pledges. Outside China, Chinese actions are actually making it difficult for everyone else to reach their targets as well. For years, China has been the largest source of public financing for the world's fossil fuel projects as part of the Chinese government's Belt and Road Initiative. Additionally, between 2014 and 2017, 91% of energy sector loans made by 6 major Chinese banks were for fossil fuel projects. And in 2018, 40% of energy sector lending went to coal projects. Fast forward to 2021. Xi announced that the time had come for China to stop building new coal projects abroad. The pledge was hailed by environmentalists the world over. However, more than 3 years after the announcement, China continues to back overseas coal projects. At the same time, a World Wildlife Fund report from 2021 found that through its import patterns, China is contributing massively to global rainforest deforestation, accounting for a bigger share of tropical deforestation caused by international trade than the US and Europe combined. That sucks on multiple levels. It's bad for the animals living in the rainforest, obviously, but it's also terrible for emissions, since the world's tropical rainforests act as a carbon sink that soaks up greenhouse gases. So, with Chinese efforts sending global climate targets spiraling increasingly out of reach, China's massive green energy bets on stuff like EVs and solar panels seem to be less about saving the climate and more about creating a future export bonanza so China can profit off other countries' climate commitments. It's industrial policy, not climate policy. And look, I know that there are lots of other countries out there in the West and beyond that aren't exactly climate darlings either. But for years now, the Chinese leadership has been portraying China's rise and national rejuvenation as an inevitability. Yet they're clearly not responsibly managing the consequences that have come with the country's growing size and heavier global impact. And there's no indication that's going to change anytime soon. Is what I would have said, but that was before I saw Xi Jinping's heroic efforts in combating climate change. With the couple of trees he took part in planting earlier this month, he only needs to plant about 1 trillion more to help mitigate the greenhouse gas emissions his government is failing to deal with. Keep up the good work, Mr. General Secretary. We believe in you. Before you go, click on this video here from my gaming channel about why so many video games are about killing God and how atheism has affected the modern world. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.